We have Angus coming in. Holly's got her new web page behind her.
I read that. I thought it was pretty good. I did.
Hey guys, how are you?
But how are you?
Hey, Angus.
By the way, I didn't forget to shave. I'm participating in the Men's Mental Health Movember event. First time I haven't been cleanly shaved in 50 years.
Wow, enjoy the vacation.
It's
From
not a
shaving.
vacation. It's
Oh, it's itchy. Yeah, I wouldn't understand.
I hope not. Are you back here?
I am. I'm on Nantucket. I'm really actually lucky to be here because there were so many crashes on the way to the boat. And I got to the boat with 4 minutes to spare. And I thought, if I'm not on this boat, there might not actually be another boat. So,
Wow.
And the winds have been sort of gusty today.
The ocean
Yeah.
looks crazy. Was it rough? It must have been rough.
yep, I got a bagel and a ginger ale and hunkered down in my favorite wavy boat ride spot. And I was okay.
The fast ferries were canceled. The steamship fast ferry was canceled.
So,
They say it's going to get worse tonight.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, isn't that good? We got to go. Well, I don't have any internet, and I'm sure they're not going to repair it today. Verizon has dropped the spoon again, yet another week. I'm using my daughter's Zip something or other that gives me internet.
So Holly, we have all 7 regular members of the Historical Commission here. Just noting that. So,
All right.
And I'm getting who's on Carrie.
Mr. Pohl, we've got Carrie, Diane, Val,
Al,
yourself.
me. Sorry, who
And
else?
Stephen is now here as well.
Stephen, okay. So I believe the way that this starts is I'll open the HTC meeting, correct?
Yes,
In the
sir.
normal Zoom way. Okay. Excuse my crib notes. Good afternoon. This is Ray Pohl, Chairman of the Nantucket Historic District Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your names, please respond in the affirmative. Right now, I have Diane Coombs.
Here.
Thank you. Val Oliver.
Here.
Very good. Carrie Thornwell.
Here.
Thank you. Stephen Welch.
Here.
And Ray Pohl for the record. Staff, when I call your names, please respond in the affirmative. Kadeem McCarthy.
Present.
Thank you. Holly Backus.
Present.
Esmeralda Martinez.
Present.
Thank you. And Terry, are you on?
She is not.
I didn't think so. Okay, thanks. That was that. Good afternoon. This open meeting of the Nantucket Historic District Commission is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. For this meeting, the Historic District Commission is convening via video conference. The Zoom app is posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Excuse me, sorry. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Before we turn to the first item on the agenda, which I believe is the only item on the agenda, let's cover some ground rules for the effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Before I have the members of the HDC speak, I will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined via Zoom. Members of the public may wish to speak. Who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Finally, any vote taken at today's meeting for the HDC will be done via roll call. I believe that covers it, right?
Yeah, I think we have to approve the agenda.
You're
Yes.
right. You're right, Diane. But
So I make a motion to approve.
okay, because this is a little different than our normal procedure because we also have to have the other members basically do the same drill. But we can, I suppose we can approve the agenda. So Diane has made a motion to approve today's agenda. On Diane's motion, Val.
Aye.
Carrie.
Aye.
Stephen.
Aye.
Thank you. Diane, on your motion.
Aye.
And I'm in favor. Motion passes. Okay, Hillary, I believe it goes to you now, does it not?
Yes, I think
Okay,
that's
great.
what's next on the agenda. I just need to open the meeting. So I'm Hillary Hedges-Raport. I'm chair of the Nantucket Historical Commission. And we're here in partnership with the Historic District Commission for our annual joint meeting as part of the Certified Local Government. And I'm just going to go around and make sure that all of the members of the Historical Commission can hear me and can announce themselves. So I see Clement Durkees.
Yes, I hear you. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom Montgomery. Tom, can you hear me?
He's muted. Tom, you're muted.
Yep,
There you
sorry.
go.
Okay, that's a yes. Thank you, Tom. Angus McLeod.
I'm here and I can hear you.
Great. Georgia Raisman.
Here.
Mickey Rowland.
Here.
David Silver.
Here.
And we have an alternate commissioner, Ben Normand.
Here.
And I think that is everybody. So I will turn it over to Holly to proceed with the business of the day.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome to our first ever Nantucket Certified Local Government Commission meeting. Thank you all. As the town's preservation planner and the CLG coordinator, I'm very happy that we're having this first important step in preservation planning for our important historic island. So thank you. Just to recap, on March 19th, 2021, the National Park Service approved the town of Nantucket's application to participate in this federal historic preservation program planning, making Nantucket the 27th community within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to be part of this important local, state, and national historic preservation partnership. And why did we become a certified local government? This designation is a commitment to historic preservation by the town of Nantucket and adds on to the generational work of fellow islanders, starting with the creation of the HDC Special Act in 1955, way before the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. Nantucket was one of the first communities to recognize this commitment to keeping our historically significant cultural resources for future generations. This commission will further that commitment in the federal historic preservation program as a partnership with our state and federal governments. This afternoon, I welcome you, HDC and NHC commissioners, as this first commission acting as Nantucket's certified local government commission. The town of Nantucket, through you, the CLG Commission, is now eligible to apply for federal grants under this Historic Preservation Fund appropriated by Congress to each state's Historic Preservation Office. They are required to provide 10% of that federal funding to certified local governments. So therefore, on March 12th, 2021, in anticipation of our CLG application, we were awarded $22,500 from MHC to work on our much needed surveys. This grant was a joint achievement by you all coming together for an end goal. So thank you very much. I'm sure you all read that supplemental and background information provided on the agenda in your packet. And I appreciate the time you took to review that important information. You will find information on the CLG, what it does, our official letter from the acceptance from the National Park Service, a copy of the signed MOU from that myself, as well as both chairs of the commission signed, as well as our select board chair at the time, a copy of the town's newly created CLG website, which is also behind me, the required open meeting law compliance statement, which is required to be signed by both chairs, some information from our camp training, which we had exactly a year ago this month. And for future knowledge, if there's any information from that camp program that you are wanting to have, please reach out and I will send it to you. A copy of the HD Special Act, a copy of the Massachusetts General Law for the Historical Commission, announcement of the fiscal year 22 survey and planning grant cycle. The Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, also called the ACHP, information on Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. I recommend you all take a look at that. And the 2022 flyer from the University of Florida's Preservation Institute program, as well as information on our survey consultants, PAL, Public Archaeology Laboratory, who's going to be conducting our much needed survey effort, and information on developing a historic preservation plan, as this could be a further endeavor by the CLG Commission. So please let me know if you have any questions on this packet of information, either today, obviously, or via email. At this time, I'd like to see if there is any public comment for any items that were not actually going to be that were posted on the agenda. I know we have some visitors here today.
Holly. I would like to make a public comment, which as a commission member, which is to thank you for all your effort in getting this done. I know it's more work for all of us, but I think it was a great achievement and it was really all on you to have done it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Georgia. I appreciate that. Something I thought since I was 16 interning at the Nantucket Preservation Trust. Why was Nantucket not a certified local government? And here we are. So thank you. One thing is obviously that's very important to come out of this commission meeting is to go over our mutual roles and required responsibilities for all the commissioners under that certified local government MOU that was agreed upon. And I'm going to just share my screen briefly here. So as you saw in the agenda, these are the required responsibilities under the CLG. And a lot of them are things that you do already. One, obviously the enforcement of the local legislation. This is obviously through the HDC Special Act from 1955. Establish an adequate and qualified historic preservation review commission, which obviously is through the HDC Special Act of 1955. And then also you also have the NHC's Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40, Section 8D. You have the National Register program participation, although due to Nantucket's unique status as a national historic landmark district, that's actually something we really don't have to worry about. They actually don't particularly ask for that. So because of our nature, we don't have to worry about that part. Obviously, the survey and inventory of historic properties, something that is mutual. And I just want to go back to something to remind everybody that members of both these commissions were, we all put on our resumes and CVs, and you are drawing from professions within the architectural history, planning, archaeology, folklore, cultural anthropology, conservation, landscape architecture, and related disciplines. With your professions, you come together as persons that have demonstrated the special interests. The HTC obviously will continue to be that responsible for enforcement of the local preservation as they have been since 1955 through that special act. And the NHC will continue to administer matters relating to the National Register and implementing the community-wide survey project. And together, obviously, the HDC and the NHC constitutes as the Certified Local Government Commission. You also, under number 3, you maintain the survey and inventory of properties. The CLG survey data will be in the format consistent with what the State Historic Preservation Office, also Massachusetts Historical Commission, what they require, and shall not be inconsistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards for identification evaluation. PAL is an excellent consultant for this process, so we are in good hands with this.
No, we're not.
And I also want to remind you all that this is a joint partnership, again, with both commissions as outlined in the special act through the preservation and protection of historic buildings, and then through the Massachusetts General Law for the preservation, protection, and development of historical and archaeological assets of the town. The survey material that's going to be provided out of this important effort will be accessible to the public, except obviously those that are archaeological in nature, as those have to be restricted for obvious reasons. These surveys should be updated periodically, and we understand that we're starting off from some that weren't done last time they were done were in the 1980s. So of course, this is something that's going to be moving forward as we go. These surveys will also be available not only here at the town, but also online through the MHC's what they call MACRIS. And you will hear me quite a bit talk about MACRIS, which is the Massachusetts Cultural Resource Information Systems. And it's our goal that all of these forms, the updated forms, will be available online. And then on a side note, I want to let everybody know that our consultants will be on Nantucket. Found this out this week, December 14th through the 16th, and they will probably be wanting to meet with some commissioners at that time. And I will keep you all up to date on that. So good stuff. And then we also have to provide for adequate public participation within the local preservation program. Obviously, this is something that the HDC and the Historical Commission both do. You do this through the state's open meeting law requirements. And then the CLG Commission will need to include any public participation as we are doing here today. And then all decisions that you all as a joint CLG Commission, if you do make any voting, those would be done by the Joint Commission. And then your participation in any MHC training sessions or workshops for this through the CLG. As you've seen, I've been sending as many things as I get across my email to you all, whether it's something that's straight from the state or if it's something from any of the nonprofits that we have available to us. Actually, a couple of the workshops that I believe I may have sent recently, one of them is from, these are coming from our government coordinator at the state. One of them is on December 1st at 7 p.m. Basics of Running a Good Commission, which is obviously via Zoom. And then establishing a local historic district, which we really don't need, but that's also available December 16th at 10 a.m. via Zoom. And then the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, which I sent to you, I think earlier today, about social media strategies for historic preservation commissions. And that's also via Zoom next week on the 17th at 1 p.m. Free to you all because we are NAPC members. So be on the lookout for those CLG specific workshops as well. The new coordinator for the state said that she'll be working on specific CLG workshops. And I think they're still going to be held through Zoom. And then one also final thing that I don't think I have here on the agenda is that the State Historic Preservation Officer, her name is Brona Simon, she at the MHC office, she at her discretion may by mutual written agreement delegate further responsibilities that she may see fit to the CLG. So there could be additional duties that she may see as assigned. And of course it would be a mutual agreement. Are there any questions on your mutual or your roles and responsibilities that are outlined in the CLG by anybody?
Holly, I have a question or comment. So it's true that we don't need to nominate any properties. We don't need to do the nominations because they're all already on the list. But I think there's, through our survey process, we're going to develop a better idea of which buildings are significant and why. And we have this concept, which is important to the HDC, of what is contributing and what isn't contributing. And we have a list from the National Historic Landmark work, which has that dictated, and I don't think everybody would agree with the way it's all listed. And so, you know, we can go to the Park Service and say, you have this listed as contributing, we really don't think it is, or the other way around. But doesn't, by the virtue of having this power to nominate our own, normally we wouldn't be able to even nominate our own properties for listing and inclusion on the National Register. But because we're a CLG, we can nominate our own properties. All of our properties are already in a district, so the process becomes a determination of which ones are contributing to the district or individually significant and which ones aren't. So my comment is, there is a determination that is ultimately made by the Park Service, but we have a little bit more of ability to do that by being a certified local government. And I wanted to have your comments and opinion about that, about how that's helpful to our joint commissions.
Yes, I personally would agree that while most CLGs are not dealing with a location that is a full National Historic Landmark district, we have that benefit. Not many places have a listing of properties that are deemed contributing or non-contributing. What I'll say this is historically speaking, the HDC has always been the governing body since its enactment of the special act of deciding what is contributing towards the local district. So it would be beneficial when we go through the updating the survey project that we're kicking off with PAL to help us assist and go through the NHL. And again, for the benefit of the HDC that's here, this is why when I provide any historic information to you all on an application that's before you, I try to indicate what's been provided by the NHL data, as well as any HDC surveys. And we also know that there's been some, because of the age of our HDC surveys being back from 1989, there are quite a few that will indicate on the survey that it's actually non-contributing, where really and truly it is, because our NHL district actually extends up to 1970, 1975. So yes, there's going to be some aspects of our survey work that's actually going to help benefit the NHL data. And I want to say that there is, if anybody has seen our NHL data that's available on the town's website, I have put a disclaimer on that on the back page, because there are some discrepancies. You also got to think that when they did do the update in 2012 from a benefit of a CPC grant that the Nantucket Preservation Trust, thank you, NPT, of acquiring from CPC to update that NHL nomination, it will, if there wasn't already a survey available, a lot of it was done what we call through a windshield survey, where these folks from National Park Service were literally driving around the island and assessing it that way. So yes, there are some discrepancies, there are some inaccuracies that I've found and others have found. So this would be a good time to take a look at that document, and this commission can do that. So thank you for that comment, Hillary.
Can I just elaborate on that? I think, Hillary, if I'm not mistaken, you were saying that we should have the right to sort of supersede state or federal designations locally, correct?
So we cannot supersede state or federal regulations. It's still, so the national, no, that's not what I was saying. I was just
Well-
saying that even though there's not a process of nominating structures, normally the number one job of historic commissions in a community would be to nominate structures for the National Registry and to maintain the National Registry, because that's like the list that guides who gets tax credits, and the list that guides, which, it's just the list of which buildings are significant. And that's, so what I was saying was just that we actually still do have the need for some thought, even though we're all the whole island is a National Registry district, there still needs to be some thought about determining what structures are contributing and significant to the districts and what aren't. And that's still ultimately determined by the Park Service, because they maintain the National Registry, we don't. But that we would have some voice in telling them what we think, and that we would do that together.
Okay, maybe things have changed, but when those macro surveys were done back in the 80s, I'm pretty sure that the designation of non-contributing, contributing, and individually significant were done locally, not through the state or through federal. All that survey information was conducted locally. And that,
Yes.
historically, that's what the HDC used as their sort of reference, and that's what we're hoping to update. So I guess all I'm saying is those designations and what is a priority was done at a local level as opposed to a state or a federal level.
So it's still done at a local level.
Well,
But
okay,
the
sorry.
determination of, I'm just talking about the National Registry, and it's a National Registry, and it has to be, it's the keeper of the National Registry is the Park Service. So I don't mean to get totally into the weeds about this. I mean, we will have plenty of time to talk about this. I just wanted to point out that there's still a need to talk and a need to determine which structures are historic and which structures are, really on the registry, even though every structure is in a district.
Correct.
Yes, you are both correct.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess moving forward, and then you all see my responsibility as your local coordinator, which I've been pretty much already facilitating and making sure that they are taken care of. I will be required to do a report. They're due actually every fall. I didn't have to do it this year because we just obviously received our approval. So I will be sending one next fall, but which will include minutes of every single commissions from both HDC and the Historical Commission from the time that we have been enacted as a CLG until that point. So if there's any questions, we can move forward. None. I guess at this time, I'd like to allow each commission, the HDC and the NHC, to provide an opening statement of discussion. And my understanding is, I think the Historical Commission will go first, if that's okay, and then the HDC will go.
Sure. So I haven't been able to review this opening statement with my commission because we haven't, met since we had this all scheduled and going. But we have talked over, several months about working jointly together as part of this certified local government. So I did put together an opening statement, but I would like to invite members of the commission to add to this statement or express their own hopes for this meeting and for our certified local government commission. So Nantucket is a living, evolving historic community and National Historic Landmark. And these two commissions working together are responsible for its preservation jointly. We have distinct but overlapping responsibilities. We're getting to know one another, and we're getting to know how to work together on our shared goal of protecting this National Historic Landmark of Nantucket. So our hope for this meeting is that Both of our commissions leave with a clear understanding of what we each do, the areas of shared work and overlap, and identify some goals that we might work towards together. And I also want to express gratitude to Holly and to the very hardworking members of the HTC who have many more meetings than we do, although we're certainly shouldering a lot of work ourselves, and we're all volunteers. And it's an amazing thing about Nantucket that we can field such a wide and well-represented group of volunteers for preservation. So with that being said, I just want to commissioners don't feel like you have to say something, but I want to give everybody a chance to add to that statement or express a personal desire for this joint meeting. And I'll call on Clement first.
Thanks, Hillary. I think we all, I know the Historic Commission just feels such a responsibility to help the HDC in any way we can. I think we sometimes participate on your meetings, which are lengthy at best. And I think we just want you to know that we're here to help. And I think getting the surveys done is going to be a big success, and getting the CLG done was another big success. So here's to working together and moving forward to protect our wonderful island. Thanks.
Thank you, Clement. Tom Montgomery.
Yeah, I really don't have too much of a comment to make at this time. I'm using this meeting kind of as a learning situation since it's our first one, but already I have to tell you, I've learned a lot in this last 32 minutes.
Thank you, Tom.
Well said, Tom.
Angus.
Thank you all for joining today. This is exciting. This is our first CLG meeting. So thank you all, and look forward to a partnership that leads to the most effective preservation that we can muster on the island. So thank you all. And thank you, Holly, for the dream and making it happen.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, I want to just echo everybody else's comments. I really appreciate the HDC being here. Thank you to all the staff for keeping this thing moving. And, here's to a little bit of collaboration over the next several years. So thank you, guys.
Ben?
Yeah, just, as a regular HTC applicant and then a sitting person on this other board, I just hope to be able to create the nice bridge between the two boards and help as I can to make it all seamless. So thank you, everybody.
Georgia?
I'm just going to echo what everyone said and also thank the HTC. They just do a huge job every week, week in and week out, at endless amounts of hours and on a volunteer basis. And they are the reason we still look like the way we look. So thank you all, guys, very much for doing that. And anything we can do to help, we would be happy to do.
And Mickey?
Yeah, I'll just agree basically with what everybody else has already stated, and really also just, say an appreciation to the staff for putting all this stuff together every week for all of our committees, including HSAB and, HTC, NHC. Very appreciated.
Thank you. So that's our opening statement, and I will turn it over to Stephen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Stephen Welch. And I actually didn't prepare anything. I was a little occupied with a personal emergency yesterday. I guess I'll start by saying I agree with everything that everyone has said. I think it's wonderful to be participating in this historic moment with two historic-oriented commissions. And I think we all look forward to accomplishing these mutual responsibilities and establishing goals that are related. I'm more of a process-oriented person. And so I think where I would pick up, and then I think at some point where we will be addressing in at least brief discussion, and then maybe going forward, or at least I would suggest certainly going forward, is the two areas of responsibility, which is there are, of the five, we have two that are still open from the CLG materials that were originally provided to us from the federal government, and Holly was so kind to include in the packet. One of them is maintaining the system for the survey and inventory of our local historic resources. And I think it's pretty clear that we all, we have a need for mutual understanding of what this involves, how it develops, what our mutual and respective roles are. So, and then and along those lines, potentially down the road, is one of our goals is looking into further development of the survey, referencing and operability with the between the National Register and the state MACRA system and the Federal Historic American Building Survey, which are also local resources that would be helpful for us to all be able to put our fingers on. And that segues into the public participation. And I think I can't speak for the other members of the commission, but knowing our workload, I will, and say that we will certainly welcome the Historic Commission, the Nantucket Historic Commission, spearheading that aspect of it. Of course, all subject to our CLG purview. And then that brings me kind of the closing, which is what I mentioned we will hopefully be getting into briefly in discussion, and then following up with in much greater detail as a springboard, is the idea of a memorandum of understanding, which is actually a motion that was part of the HDC's approval for involvement by our vote. And that's to establish and articulate the expectations of the respective commissions, including how we'll coordinate our efforts in furthering our responsibilities. So it's essentially establishing some guidelines and guardrails that will promote our accomplishing those responsibilities with both observance and furtherance of our purview. And I think those are important things. That's an important task and effort. Institutionalizing these expectations and related matters in writing by way of MOU is actually fairly standard practice and helpful. It's especially helpful given the HCC's primary mission is not specifically focused on CLG related matters. We two commissions meet infrequently, and I think it will be a great benefit to us. So that's just kind of a general guidelines or outline, I should say, on the guidelines and guardrails relative to the two open responsibilities. And of course, I would ask that if any member of the commission wanted to speak, to please do so, and I'd cede the floor now. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. My sentiments are sort of align with Tom's that he said earlier. I'm really here to listen and to understand. But so far I like the tone of where we're going. Thank you, Holly. Anyone else from the HDC?
It's Carrie here.
I would say, oh, Carrie, you go. I was muted.
Oh, you can go ahead, Diane.
Oh, that's right. You go first.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm happy to be here and to also be learning sort of what this whole thing means going forward. I think the surveys are going to be really exciting to have updated, and I have a question about them. Do we have any idea of a time frame? Is it 2 years, 5 years, when we expect to have such a tool for our use? Because I think that will be extremely helpful. But I'm looking forward to continuing to learn what it means to be a part of this group. So thank you.
Carrie, I can elaborate a little bit for the benefit of you and everybody here. The survey program or project that the NHC helped submit and PAL has accepted is actually it's got two scopes in one. So one is to create a survey plan tackling the entire NHL. To basically, you need to have a plan to figure out how we're going to tackle each section of the island. So PAL's going to come up with that. And then they're also going to be simultaneously at the same time, they're going to be tackling a pilot program. So how they would actually facilitate that that survey work, and that we chose the fish lots. So they're going to be taking the fish lot section of downtown, obviously that was laid out in 1717, and updating any of the HDC surveys that are there and creating new ones for approximately about 100 properties. And again, these two projects are going to be going at the same time. There's going to technically starting now, and the projects will end in August of next year. So this is going to be obviously almost a year's project. And the pilot, again, is going to be a vision of how they're going to, or who, when we would tackle the rest of the island. So that survey plan is going to be very imperative, and that will be the basis of us moving forward for multiple years. And this federal money that we've acquired through the CLG is how we envision on doing that. So for the benefit of the HDC, the Historical Commission actually has submitted what we call a pre-application for fiscal year 22. I think I indicated that in the supplemental information in the agenda. And in hopes we will be selected at the beginning of next year to put in another application to, again, continue the survey work. So this CLG funding that they're required to give 10% to all CLGs, and again, there's only 27 in the Commonwealth, is very beneficial to our preservation planning for our surveys. Hope that helps. I guess it's Diane's turn.
Oh, thank you, Holly. Thank you for everything you've done. What I think one of the good things about this is, as a member of the HCC, buildings come up that we have to act on, whether it is an old one or a newer one or whatever. I think to get these up to date will be most important in saving some buildings that we don't know the age of, and the age is reported that for some reason or other there's a period in the thing that the age is given by whatever government did it is wrong. I think, Holly, we've run into that before when they say it was 1920 and we know it was 1865. I think this will be very important to help us and help the island keep the historic image that it has, and to save the buildings and treat them with the respect that they deserve as to where they are in the age and as part of the island background. That's all.
Do we have any other comments from HDC commissioners?
I believe that was everyone. If I'm not mistaken. Oh, Val has not spoken, but.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, at this time then, if it's okay with the CLG Commission, gosh, that sounds nice. I like that. Would like to go over the poll results, the survey. I guess I should mention, for the benefit of the public and non-commissioners alike, I send out a very short survey for the commissioners to take before today's important meeting. And this also gives staff an understanding of what topics are on their mind. And it was anonymous, so that's I think has its own layer to it, if you will. So with that, let me share my screen. No, wrong way. I think I get this by now, right? Okay. So I put this on here actually with the results because I thought it was really cool. It really gives a visual of where we are in the Federal Preservation Partnership Program. Here we are. Down here is a certified local government, our State Historic Preservation Office, National Park Service, and actually the tribes are included within this overall partnership. And I think I'm going to actually ask our public outreach coordinator to put this on the website that's behind me to have a nice visual. So this is the results that we received from the survey, we had about 12 responses out of 18 total commissioners. I do want to notate for the record that there are a couple of commissioners who actually reached out and couldn't attend today, so they actually did not fill out the survey. They didn't want to be included within that conversation. So that's fine. But here you go. As far as in order from top down, updating building with Nantucket in mind, our demo, move, and salvage discussion, pools and spas were of obviously some concern, historic structure survey, preservation planning in general, because as much as the HDC doesn't really get to dive into preservation planning as the architectural review board day in, day out, week after week, there is a level of preservation planning that you all have your role, especially with that special act and prior to the federal law. And then Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. And I had outlined reasons in our agenda. Both commissions have a member who sits on any of the discussions under Section 106 for wind farms and obviously play a role in the consultation process of that. And we also had another category. These are some topics that came up. Work group to map out that MOU out of our respective roles and duties, update our historic surveys with general discussion, including the use, MOU with appropriate partnerships, coastal resiliency, wind turbines and the effect that they have on the island, provide more awareness to the community at large about the visual impact. So these are some topics that came up out of the surveys. 1, 2. Yeah. So then it sounds like everybody's willing to meet if the case is. And then these were the real topics that people brought up. So obviously funding for surveys was right there in there, which is great to see. Controlled developments in historic districts. Want to see how this meeting works. I think so far it's doing good. Aid in our historic surveys, that's great. Forwarding a plan to help salvage interior features, otherwise being thrown away to renovations. Again, that goes back to the WPI project, which obviously the Historical Commission is aware of, and I've brought it to the HDC's attention, and I believe the WPI students have been reaching out. Please let me know on that note if you would like to be interviewed by the WPI students. Obviously, every commission member from both the HDC and the Historical Commission are a very important role in this whole discussion with the WPI students. Obviously, our historic structure surveys and the rewriting of Building with Nantucket in Mind. I would say Building with Nantucket in Mind doesn't necessarily need to be rewritten, but there's definitely parts of it that can be updated and should be updated, as it's been quite a long time. Permanent local legislation to not allow swimming pools in the OHG. And of course, that would be a topic of discussion. I hope within 2 years, HDC and NHC could gather, sponsor, and expand demo delay bylaw for non-historic homes that allows these homes to be salvaged or reused. We'll really see what WPI students come up with. I hope there is a more consistent process for determining whether a structure is perfectly preserved and contributing before a demo permit can be issued. Definitely. I hope the commission can work together to advocate for a larger staff. I hope to agree on standards for when and how landscapes can be considered screening. I think that was probably another good one to talk about. Building with Nantucket in Mind can be updated, yes, but what more web friendly? I will notate that the HDC website does have a link to Building with Nantucket in Mind. So it's been on the town's website for quite a long time. It is in PDF format by section, and then it's also in PDF format in its entirety. It's whether you consider it web friendly or not, it could be definitely more web friendly. So I don't agree with that. I disagree with that, excuse me. Establish a working relationship with all island agencies to further historic preservation. I think both commissions have done that, and I would hope through yours truly, we've been able to establish a great working relationship with not only NPT, NHA, MMA, and of course, Preservation Institute, Nantucket through the University of Florida, and WPI. To streamline the HDC process by encouraging all participants to be prepared for the meeting. This includes commissioners. Absolutely get HDC out from under plus. I'm not going there with that conversation. I do, see the benefits of having HDC included with plus. Strengthen preservation efforts by making better use of existing regulations, more knowledge on the subject afoot, and increase collaboration between both commissions. Again, there's some topics that were brought up in the surveys that I maybe a little bit too much for your first initial meeting. But going back on what Stephen brought up with the MOU, yes, that is something that both commissions have brought up individually. And I do agree and have had conversations with town admin on facilitating that. I have been remiss in getting that going, but that is definitely something to bring up, and would definitely encourage maybe each commission to have its own individual work group to facilitate that. And I, as your common denominator, your CLG coordinator and preservation planner, would be more than happy to be that in between to get that going with each individual work group from each individual commission. But I do think that's a good starting point. Again, it's laid out really clearly within the MOU that was required. And the only reason why it was required is because the state and the National Park Service understands that there are locations like Nantucket that have already had an established historic district commission and didn't have a historical commission. Some towns actually become one ginormous commission. I think we all have to think that Nantucket, again, is unique. We've been told by the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions and their trainers that Nantucket is one of the busiest, if not the busiest commission in the country. I think you have to look at our National Historic Landmark designation in the local district and see that is a reason why. Also, other things that come into play. But I think these were great topics, and would love to pass this over to our chairs for further discussion on these topics.
Hey, Holly.
Yes, sir.
So a lot of topics were thrown out, and it wasn't immediately apparent to me. I thought that might have been something that you drafted, but it was clearer to me later on that those, you basically took comments from members of the two boards and put them in a list. Right?
Yes, those are right from the survey. Yes.
Right. So, honestly, I don't know personally how I could select a topic and talk about or have discussion circle around a particular topic. Do you know what I'm saying?
Do we want to go through the topics that were that I put in the poll that you all took, the survey that you all took, and go from there?
You mean the priorities?
The priorities, yes.
Well, if I could just chime in too. So we're going to have a group discussion at this point, and Ray and I are going to moderate it with Holly's help. And this survey, I think it's helpful because people can just say what's on their mind, say what they care about, and not feel like they have to be, they could be anonymous. I mean, we don't know who said these things. So I thought it was super interesting to have that feedback. I took some notes and I'm trying to remember what everybody said. But for this discussion, what we had laid out as the priorities were to identify our areas of overlapping concern, which perhaps we did effectively with that survey, which said that I think the top was updating building with Nantucket in mind, followed by issues around demolitions, moving of structures, and then pools. And then surveys was also very interesting, but I think we're actually in a pretty good place with surveys because we're moving forward with the program and we're going to be having an opportunity for everybody to participate, learning about, this whole plan. It's going to take years. But in this first year, we'll have this, study done, which will tell us how long it will take. And we'll have opportunities to have meetings just about the survey so that everybody can understand what's happening and have input into it. So I think it's the updating building with Nantucket in mind, the demo and issues around pools seem to float to the top of that list. And not I'm just thinking what else was listed in the freeform response. There was a long list. There was a couple comments about staffing, proper support and staffing. And this is really an issue of I'll say, speaking from the NHC, this is totally up to the HDC, how it's staffed, but we can help support and advocate and, be a discussion partner around that.
I just speak to that just for a second.
Sure.
I don't think it is actually up to the board members of the HTC how it's staffed, because we would certainly love, I think the board in general would love to have more rather than less support from the staff. But, we've been told quite a few times that it's not in the budget. So as much as we would like to have more people, more hands on deck, Holly, am I correct in saying that there were 2 new hirees?
Yes, sir. There were 2 more admins. And
Yeah. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. But, as someone who runs a business, there's this sort of learning curve period, which, there's a lot to know about the HDC and, kind of the inner workings and all that. And so there will be a period of time where, those new recruits will be of limited amount of help and perhaps maybe even, be more of a burden for the current staff, because now you have to sort of train those people in, all of our inner workings. So it's good that there's more hirees, but it is a slow process and not entirely up to the board. If it were entirely up to the board, we would have had probably twice as many people in the office. I remember the days of the HDC when it was an independent, organization. And I think there was probably like 5 people working in the HDC office devoted exclusively to HDC matters. That's it. So sorry to interrupt.
No, Mr. Chair, I also
Yes.
just wanted to make it clear that the additional bodies that we got are not like additional staff. They're simply filling in for staff members that had left, so we've always had 5 administrative specialists out front, and we still just have 5 administrative specialists out front. So we are just now, after like 2.5 years, back to where we should be. So it's not additional bodies, just so everyone knows.
That's a really good point, Kadeem.
Yeah, that's important.
What that means is you're sort of, we're not going up, we're status quo. And those are shared bodies. Mainly.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, so for the, and yeah, thank you for that clarification. But so for the purpose of this discussion, what we had said was that we wanted to identify some areas of concern, mutual concern, overlapping concern, and then think about do a bit of a visioning exercise. Think about 5 years forward, what would we like to see different? What are some stretch goals? What could happen? Not saying that it's definitely going to happen, but I think it's always useful to have some kind of vision. And then kind of pull back from that to the nearer term. Are there a couple of things that we actually really think we could work on together?
Hillary, may I comment?
Of course.
I'm thinking about those 3 top items: building with Nantucket in mind, salvage and demo, and pools and spas. And I'm thinking that in areas that we could work together, and I'm putting that together with the requirement that there be public outreach on the part of the certified local government. And salvage and demolition have been important issues for preservation since I was at the Nantucket Preservation Trust, which was 20 years ago. Even then, we were talking, as Holly will remember, about how do you keep people from throwing away the historic elements of the inside of their property, which, as you know, we have no control over. And if they're going to renovate the inside of it and they're going to throw away this gorgeous mantle or this wonderful piece of architecture, what can be done? And if that's still rising to the top of a list of things we're concerned about, and we need to do public outreach, and we're working together on this with the HDC, is there some way we could put together some kind of a panel, maybe with realtors, maybe just for the public at large, on how we can value, where we can find a place to store these things, and how we can perhaps finally look for a way of keeping these items in the community and making them available for reuse, especially since now it's a green topic. I mean, it was a green topic even then, but it's even greener now. Can we think about that as something that we could all work on together, and that could be a matter that we could put in the public outreach element of as well? I think pools and spas relate to a current issue that's kind of a hot topic right now, and I really can't speak to that, but the salvage and demolition bit is something that's bothered me for a very long time.
Okay, thank you, Georgia. So what I'm hearing is a strong interest in having some goals and some objectives working together around the salvage. And would you put the demo issues up there as well, or are you just more focused on salvage?
I guess I'm thinking of demolition is so rare to begin with. I'm really thinking more of the salvage of interior elements. But if there were to be demolition, being able to retrieve reusable objects in the course of a demolition.
Okay.
Can I speak to that just briefly?
Me too.
Me too.
Yeah, I saw Tom put his hand up, and then I think Ray and.
Yeah, I still have to learn how to use the putting the hand up function. So I just blurt out. The HDC, as we all know, is charged with the exterior features of a building. So if there's a beautiful mantle on the inside, I'm sure every member of the HDC, every member of all these combined commissions, as well as most of the people that live in this town, would love to see all that stuff salvaged. It's not part of our review. I think the best we could do on that score as the HDC is to say, oh, guess what? There's this old building. It looks like they're going to be doing stuff to the interior. There's going to become this interior fabric will become available. And then let somebody know it's going to happen, and then somebody else takes it over. And that's my point, is it's sort of outside of our purview to be in control of what is taken out of the interior of a building. Looks like Diane wants to speak on this.
Well, that's the two questions of mine that I've had for a long time. How do we go about going to the state or wherever to get permission to, under certain historic buildings, have control of the inside? I think that is very important, because so much goes, and they buy an old house and they don't do too much to the outside, but the inside they strip from wall to wall, and they've lost all the old stuff inside. And I think somehow there's got to be something. Everybody keeps saying it's not in our purview, but it's time that it was in our purview to protect the inside as well as the outside. That's number one. Number two, when I was in Boston, they had in Quincy a historic place where stuff was brought, and it was sold. I had to buy some flooring from the Boston Library to do a floor in my house, but it was all there. I have offered, or Bruce Holgate has offered, a place to at least start so that we can save stuff and make it known to the contractors and the owners that there will be some place to save it. I think it has to do with notice in the newspaper and conversations, because we're losing so much of the interior moldings, fireplaces, mantles, flooring, and it's being thrown out because the contractors, for the most part, don't care, and the owners don't know. So I am totally behind finding a place, but I would like to know the ins and outs of how to get some control on the inside of buildings.
Thank
Like
you,
main-
Diane. And I know Holly probably wants to talk to us about the WPI project, which is looking at all of this. I really want to get ideas out on the table and not kind of think we're going to be able to chase down individual answers to individual things, but more surface what we think what's bubbling up to the top is the areas where we could really, get together and do something about that. And I'm putting down on the list Diane's very good question of, is there any other thing that can be done about the interiors? And I think everybody would like to see, a building resources. And that's something I know Holly is working on. And Tom had his hand up, so I just wanted to invite Tom to speak.
Well, several people have already said what I was going to say. Early on in our discussions at the historical commission meetings, I had brought up the idea, having been a preservation carpenter myself for a long time, the idea of having a building materials supply, or whatever you want to call it, salvation stuff that we use whenever they gut an old house, and take out the mantles and the columns and the raised paneling and the flooring and that stuff, and have it take it or leave it somewhere. I didn't know that Holgate had offered to have that, but that would be an ideal place that people could go and either get it or buy it or whatever. And I also agree with Diane's first comment, and having been Charles Kilvert's caretaker at the Starbuck House for many years, that was a almost a complete gut job in there, and it was too bad to see that go the way it did. That's all my only comment.
Would it be useful, just thinking of a frame to put on this, to say that our two commissions might want to make sustainability an objective, figuring out what that would mean if we said sustainability is a value? Would it be useful to declare that we have shared values as a framework to figuring out what our objectives would be? Holly?
I would agree with that, because from HDC meetings, historical commission meetings that I have the benefit of going to both, you all bring out those conversations. And what everybody's talking about right now with the demo move salvage is why the town, through our DPW department, is working with WPI students on looking at salvaging. And you both have, obviously, both the commissions have been notified that these students would like to interview you, and I would encourage you to do so, because they're going to be coming up with a report, obviously, with a whole plethora of ideas from looking at other communities within the country on what Nantucket can do, because they understand how unique Nantucket is, and the fact that we obviously have to move. We need there's all sorts of different aspects that are around this, from salvaging the interiors that's being mentioned, but there's also the aspect, and I've brought to their attention, and this is a lot from what the Historical Commission does with the historic tax credits and helping folks being able to do that. But I think the first thing to remember, and I see Mary here from MPT, the first and foremost highest form of preservation obviously would be a preservation restriction. So having the foresight to want to preserve the interiors of a structure in perpetuity for the next generations down the road is up to that property owner. But obviously having those type of incentives, or just be an advocate like MPT does, would help with that whole process. But then thinking outside the box from a sustainability perspective, because yes, you're right, sustainability is one of the select board's aspects of their strategic plan. So historic preservation and sustainability work hand in hand. And again, I would highly recommend reaching out to the WPI students to give them your individual insight in this whole demo move and deconstruction concerns everybody's been having.
Carrie?
Sorry, I don't know how to do it.
I don't either.
How to wave my hand, but
Just raise your hand.
The salvage idea is a wonderful one, but it brings in the idea of property to hold all this stuff and almost a private business, unless the town, believing in sustainability, would move a building to the dump to house all the pieces of buildings that people are getting rid of. And would that come through a town article? Would it be the group of us saying this needs to happen because a lot of historic fabric is being dumped, and if it's going to the dump, put it in a place that it can be reused rather than going into a dumpster? So that's just one sort of logical step that needs to happen, because everybody's been talking about salvage for years, but nobody in the public realm has stepped up to privately own a property to hold all this stuff, to move it, to trade it, to sell it, whatever. So how would that be done? And then advertising. When you apply to demo a house, you have to advertise it in the paper for, I believe, a week or two to see if anybody wants to take it. But with an historic renovation, the elements should be advertised as well. And that should be down to the applicant who is trying to demo the interior of these buildings. So there's physical things that people can do. We just need to put that as part of our rule system to get a building permit.
Carrie, would you agree that, do you like the idea of having a value, coming up with some values for the Certified Local Government Commission, that sustainability would be a value? Or
yeah, I just wonder how it's going to be implemented. Stating that we have the value, I think we all sort of have that value.
Right.
Just by being on the board. We are all interested in historic preservation, but we know the reality of Nantucket is property owners have their rights, and people don't want to always live in historic buildings, even though they buy them, which doesn't seem to make sense. But it's just, how do you get it done? How do you get the salvage thing going?
So the short answer to that, and I've given this a lot of thought, is either it makes sense to do salvage, as you say, through a private enterprise, that somebody would actually make money off of this, or it's something that the town, through the select board, would set aside money, to do what you were just discussing, Carrie, which is, some sort of a facility out at the dump, or, one of the town properties where they could warehouse this stuff. And then it would be a town effort funded by the town, which I think the latter is probably going to be the more
realistic,
practical option, because if there were a profit incentive to doing this, somebody would have done it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. People have talked about it forever, and it doesn't.
I don't want to get into the weeds with all of this, but
You already are, Tom.
That's why we're here.
I suppose we are. But okay, if someone takes something out of a historic property, I could see them just doing a minor cataloging of it, so that if it goes somewhere else, we have a historic, I don't know what, a trail, I guess is what you could call it, where it came from one place and went to another. And that would be up to whoever is running the property. how we get the property and where it comes from and all that is another discussion. But the stuff we've got left in Nantucket, I think is worth enough to be considering doing something like that.
Soon.
Val, oh, sorry, Val had her hand up.
Diane's had her hand up for a while.
Oh,
No, I already said what I had to say, Val.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how to put it down. So, sorry.
Okay.
Val, did you want to say something?
Yeah, if we're talking about sustainability, it shouldn't just be historic properties. It should be all houses that are getting moved or demoed. I think there are ways to have, but it's not, I think, germane to this discussion. So I think that's another topic down the road, but it should be every structure. And I don't mean cataloging like Tom talks about. I think you can say to people, look, the 30 days is up. People are coming they're going to demo the house. Anybody who wants to come in and pick this house apart and take cabinets and doors and all that stuff should just be allowed to do that.
So I totally agree with that, Val. I don't think we're going to solve this problem today. So
right.
And I see that Ray has his hand up too. I just wanted to suggest that if we could identify a few values, and if we could agree that we have the appetite to have working groups, then we could have working groups assigned to the different values to come back with specific suggestions. I mean, I too have a long list of ideas, actually legislative ideas to fund this. So given that, we have limited time, can we maybe go around and figure out, like, do we want to make sustainability a value? And do we want to actually have a subcommittee that would work on sustainability and come back to this group with specific implementable ideas?
Yeah.
Okay, I heard Diane say yes. I heard Val say.
I was going to just ask, I know all this stuff is really important, but we have a short window today. Should we be talking about what our roles are, or what our understanding of each other is, or are we tabling that for later?
We can move on to that next.
I like the idea, I like the idea of having something we can get started on doing.
Georgie, you want to get started on doing some things? Is that what you said? Yeah.
Yes.
Do you like the idea of having sustainability as a value and having a working group around it?
That's unarguable, yes.
Okay, yes. Ray?
Same. I think that there isn't a person on this call or this Zoom session that would disagree the sustainability would not be a value. So in terms of, the mechanics of how that's done, it's complicated. I'm on both sides. I'm an architect, and, I deal with buildings new and old. And so I've actually done the thing where, the house is getting stripped and all kinds of people show up and it's chaos because they're removing cabinetry and so forth. And then the builder is worried about liability and things like that. So there's a lot of finer points that need to be discussed, probably at the level of a subcommittee. But yeah, the overarching goal of sustainability, yes, absolutely. And I don't think there's a member of our board that would disagree with that.
Oh, okay. Then maybe we could have that as a value, and after the meeting, we could circulate like a sign-up sheet. And can we move on to maybe talking about some other values? Does anybody have anything else they wanted to say about sustainability and having that as something we might have a working group around? Okay. I think there was also an interest in the MOU and what Val was just saying. We also have issues around pools and screening and building with Nantucket in mind. Would anybody like to make a suggestion about what else they want to talk about? right?
Oh, you mean apropos of what you just mentioned? Those items that you just mentioned?
Or anything. I just thought, what is
Well,
our
so
next
this
thing?
with here, this, you know, it's kind of random, but with respect to the pool thing,
Yeah,
I'm sure you know that Ann Duez is sponsoring a warrant article, you know,
Yes.
citizen-sponsored warrant article that would alter the definition of pool, you know, because that was sort of something that slipped through the cracks. You know, everybody thought that pools were being prohibited in the OHD, and turns out, well, actually, it's only a pool if it's this big. And so she has, you know, on her own time, gone and changed that language and has this article. And she's been before our board once now, and then we gave her some feedback on it, and she's going to, I think, look at the language again. And at a certain point, it's going to, you know, she's going to submit it. And she'd be looking for an endorsement from both our board and your board. And that would give her strength moving forward to get a, you know, positive recommendation from, is it the FinCom who would be endorsing that article?
Planning board.
Planning board, sorry, I always get them mixed up. Anyway, I laud the fact that she's doing that. You know, I'm hoping that she can get a lot of support from town agencies so that it gets a positive recommendation, because that's going to mean a lot when it gets to the, you know, to the town meeting. That's what I have to say on that one. Thank you.
Thanks for that summary, Ray. And I think the thing that maybe Anne would like some guidance on, I don't know, I don't want to speak for Anne, but I know an open issue is, and she's come to present to our board as well. So the feedback that our board gave her was that we were grateful that she was trying to sort out some pretty confusing and contradictory zoning language. The issue being that the pools, even before they were banned in the historic district in 2011, they were defined as having a limit of 1,000 gallons. And then when they were banned, there was also a dimensional of surface area added to that. And then, and it was big, it's like bedroom size is this, or bigger is a swimming pool, but also 1,000 gallons. And then when spas were added in, as a definition of spa was included in the zoning code in 2017, it included only the surface area as being a number smaller than what was in the pool definition, but also no definition of gallonage. And if you just take the math, there's a math problem, because if you just take that, you know, 150 square foot and you make it a 4 feet deep vessel, you are automatically over the gallonage, like more than twice over the gallonage limit. So that's the thing that Anne is trying to clear up. And I think that's pretty obvious. But the other thing that's maybe not so obvious that voters will have to weigh in on is, do voters in the historic district actually want to ban spas? So it's really only relevant to the people who live in the, or transact in the districts where pools are banned, because yeah. So, and then the question from our shared boards is the screening, and, you know, what kind of new landscapes are being created as screening, and the whole idea, you know, why is it okay that you can have, you know, a totally inappropriate pool if you screen it with a hedge, but the idea of having, you know, a white house, stucco house with a flat roof screened by a hedge is not okay. So that gets to the question of screening. So I don't know how to put this in a value that we could put a working group about, but I just wanted to put those issues out there for comment.
Yeah. The pool thing is exceedingly difficult, and how do I say this? All the screening. Okay, so we're in control of the screening, correct? But we're not really in control of being able to say, oh, privet is good, but, Japanese holly is not good, this or that. We're allowed to talk about a formal landscape versus an informal landscape, that sort of thing, but we can't get too granular on, what type of vegetation is being used, other than that it's deciduous or evergreen. But my concern is that, if something like this went to Superior Court, if the HCC becomes the arbiters of pools and water features based on visual aspects, and we do, the screening thing, and it goes to Superior Court, and Superior Court would basically look at it and say, like, well, who cares what kind of shrubbery there is? In other words, I've seen when things go off island to court, all of the local concerns sort of disappear. And, the fact that it's one neighborhood rather than another neighborhood doesn't really carry a lot of weight at a state level in state court. So we have to be really careful, ideally, and Ann said this, ideally, the perfect warrant article would be to ban any kind of water feature in the old historic districts. Done, end of story. But she also has to be concerned about getting it actually approved, at town meetings. So it's a very difficult, nuanced thing. And I think we're all working on it, thinking about the right strategy to use. But it goes without saying that, this is obviously a very, very hot button issue, and it always seems to be falling to the HTC to determine, what the proper thing to do is. Have them, not have them under certain conditions, certain sizes, whatever. So I'd rather be relieved of that burden, honestly. Sorry, I'm talking way too much here.
There's a lot to say. I mean, do we, for the purpose of this meeting, which is to decide about, things we want to work on together, what do we want in 5 years to have, including Ray saying, I don't want to have to always be falling to the HTC, that's kind of in 5 years, you don't want to have to deal with this anymore, or probably sooner than that, 2 years. Yeah, 0 years. So what can anybody offer an idea around? So we're talking about issues around screening of, I think, anything that's inappropriate or that, is inconsistent with the guidelines, and specifically, the pools, it's really a zoning issue.
I neglected to say one very important thing. Yeah. The funny thing about, and any of the members of my board that are on this session right now would agree with this statement. Although when there are objections made at the HDC, they're supposed to be focused on, the view of the pool, not the people around the pool, but the pool itself, the view of the pool from a publicly traveled way. That's what we're supposed to be looking at.
Yeah.
But what inevitably comes into the conversation is this pool is going to have lights in it, and it's going to have kids screaming all night long and parties. And we know those kids over there, and they stay up all night long. And it's a much larger issue than the idea of like looking at a pool in a yard with no people around it. It really has more to do with the people. And so the fact that it keeps coming to the HDC is avoiding a much larger issue. There's a much larger issue that has to do with sort of like the nuisance factor of a pool in a densely populated downtown area. That's the real issue. And so we can do what we can as our board, and you can do what you can do as your board. But, there's a lot that's objectionable about pools that doesn't have a heck of a lot to do with the historic nature of the downtown fabric, et cetera. It has to do with the nuisance factor, really.
Carrie had her hand up.
Thank you. In terms of the visibility issue, this is something that sort of drives me crazy because architecture should be visible. In Nantucket, because we have a stringent HDC process, a lot of times people, and I've done it myself. Oh, you can't see this, therefore you shouldn't judge against it. But in the Historic District Commission, we have, I think, the backup of precedent and the historic nature of certain neighborhoods. And I think it's a very valid argument to say, no, a pool, a spa doesn't belong here. There is no precedent for it. So whether we can see it or not, it kind of doesn't matter if you're in a neighborhood where there are no pools or spas yet. And that seems to me a very valid argument. But then there's always the thing, private property rights and going to court. And I know that we don't want to go to court all the time, but I just feel like our only argument can't be just because you can't see it. If it's there, it's a physical part of the historic fabric all of a sudden, whether you see it or not.
With all due respect.
So
with all due respect.
Yes, please, go ahead.
If you read our enabling legislation, it has to do with what is visible from a publicly traveled way. That's it. And if we are going to be expected to be the board to enforce that, we need to change the language of the legislation. Otherwise, it will totally fall apart in Superior Court. I guarantee it.
And it's actually not possible to change that language because
probably not.
Yeah. I saw
know.
David had his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Based on our last meeting, I believe that we had a discussion regarding a, kind of a ban on pools in both historic districts, in downtown and in Sconset. And there seemed to be a relatively strong amount of support from our commissioners. Is that something that falls under our purview, Madam Chair, to where we could move forward with that warrant and endorse Anne?
Yeah, David, I think it's a great question, and thank you for getting us back on the track that we started down. So we had 100% of our commissioners advise Anne that, well, I think advise me to advise Anne that we supported a ban on spas as well as a ban on pools in the historic districts. So we supported that Anne should add the gallonage limit to Anne's article. Zoning, it's a zoning article, would add the gallonage limit to spas of 1,000. And that in fact puts a determination on you can only make a useful spa so big. And that we further supported that spas not be allowed in the historic districts because it created so many problems with the lengths people had to go through to actually hide these spas in the historic districts was creating themselves landscape architecture that was not appropriate in the districts. So that was our position. And yeah, maybe a useful thing on this matter is just to go around and ask if we want to make a strong statement to the planning board together and what should be in that statement. Does anybody, let's hear from some different people too. I mean, other NHC or, anybody else want to kind of articulate what this might be? And Clement has her hand up.
Yeah, I can't do the hand either, but once again, it seems like maybe this is certainly a shared value of both commissions. Would it be appropriate for perhaps the historic district to have a workforce group and we can come up with some guidelines that we think should be appropriate and identify that to the HDC and then get their approval of that and see if we can either add it to Anne's citizens warrant or present it to the zoning, planning and zoning in some fashion that, both commissions support this. I think if we could come down to a few things that we can work on together, or I mean, I know HDC, I feel like, doesn't have the time to add another workforce group to their already overworked. But if they would agree that the Historic Commission could establish a workforce group that would come up with some identifiable exact deliberations on, ideas surrounding sustainability and ideas around the pools and the screening, and present them as a joint issue.
So Clement, how would you articulate, I think we have the one value, sustainability, and we can have multiple little groups. I don't want to assume that no one from the HCC has time to do it. I mean, I would certainly hope that some people would like to be on some of these commissions, especially if they're efficient and well run, and we can do it on Zoom. But Clement, how would you articulate the value around that we were talking about the pools? I mean, is it broader than just pools? What is the value?
Well, I know that we, as David said, as a commission, we all agreed that we wanted to establish some an accountability around the pools. And I understand that Ray has his problems and the whole issue of private ownership and what people can do with their properties. But if we could establish some way where we would have some strict guidelines over what the HDC could point to as a reason for not allowing a pool, instead of just saying it will be visible from the road or it won't be visible for the road. If we could try to come up with some specific details on that could be used.
What would be helpful to the HTC? Maybe what would be helpful? Val, did you want to say something, or are you just leaning forward?
I don't know. I'm kind of confused about how all of this works. And yeah, it's too much.
Okay. Well, I don't want you to be confused. Yeah, Carrie?
I don't know what you guys do and what we do, and that's the basic truth of it. I'm so sorry. I just don't understand how all of this works.
Okay. Well, should we take a pause? And I can address that, and other people can chime in. I mean, Val, you all make the design guidelines. We don't make them, you make them. And you all enforce them and issue certificates of appropriateness. And you all also enforce the minimum maintenance bylaw. And those are your primary responsibilities, the developing and implementing the design guidelines and issuing these certificates of appropriateness so that the old structures are not inappropriately altered, and the new structures are in sympathy with the old and are following the guidelines. And of course, you have to operate yourselves as well. So you have to, decide what fees you're going to charge. And
out of our hands.
It's not. It is totally not. The HDC is an independent commission. And it says in the special act that you can charge the fees that are necessary. And there may be some overarching, legislation of the town that, so, you do have to take the fees out of the town budget, but I think it is a discussion. And this is where having two commissions advocating together for these issues is helpful. And as far as what we do, we advocate for preservation. We have a specific responsibility for preparing the surveys, for nominating properties to be on the National Register, which in our case means nominating properties to be considered contributing to our district, which effectively puts them on the National Register. We advocate, we're also an independent commission, and we liaise with the Massachusetts Historical Commission at the state level and the Park Service at the federal level to get funding to do these surveys and make these nominations for the National Registry. We also do preservation planning. So we liaise with Holly and the planning board to think about how historic resources and the whole visual quality of Nantucket is taken into consideration in town master plans, in zoning. We advocate for legislation for preservation. So for instance, we might decide that we need to extend the demo delay that we have in our town for sustainability. And that is actually in the interest of preservation as well. And so that would be a bylaw that we would advocate for. And we also have a specific responsibility when it comes to this Section 106 reviews and the state corollary, which is that when there is any project on Nantucket that takes federal money or uses state or federal financing, it has to be reviewed for whether or not it has an adverse effect on the historic district, which is
that is huge.
Yes.
Especially with regard to the 8 wind farms that are going to be around us.
So we used the Section 106 review process. And when I say we, I really mean the town, because the town led this. Our commission was a consulting party that led the negotiation with Vineyard Wind.
Not enough money.
That created a mitigation fund. But that was the process. And I know you have very vested interest and opinions on this, Val, but that was a big Section 106 process. But you know what else was a Section 106 process is the sewer force main. So we worked closely with an incredibly cooperative and well-organized sewer department to point out historic resources along the route, which goes all the way from C Street all through the very core of the historic district, out Pine Street, a very old street, all the way out to Surfside. And we had a group of Mickey and Tom and I that walked that entire place, that entire road, and we gave specific feedback about where the historic resources were that needed to be avoided or needed to be protected, and we gave them photographs. And we sent all of that to the Massachusetts Historical Commission so that hopefully when it all works out, we will have a project that, even though it's digging up artifacts from our streets, it's taking care of them and putting them back. So that was another Section 106 review. So that's basically it, Val. And then of course we have to work together because the HDC is, the most powerful tool we have really on Nantucket for the day in, day out protection of historic resources. So, we're going to advocate to you to say whatever we're going to say. There are other things we might decide, but we are kind of more of the preservation planning, surveying, but also legislating.
I have another thought of, those, what are they called? The little dividing up of lots that is the 4181L or something like that.
Oh, the pre-1955 subdivision, the pre-1955.
Killing us. Because now you get weird lots and we have to approve something that doesn't look like anything else because it can't.
I know. And I'm not sure if there's, if that is a huge issue, we would want to know. I don't know. I know that happens. Does everybody know what we're talking about? When there's a pre-1955 structure, and it's a approval not required subdivision by right. If that is a huge issue, there's some question about whether or not that could really be tested in the courts. I think we would want to know that it's a huge issue. I'm not aware of how big of an issue it is.
I think it is, because they keep popping up all over the place. And you know, maybe out of town, it's not an issue. I don't know of any out of town, but in town, it's just awful. Awful. Tiny little lots in big houses. So,
Yeah.
That's where we put the salvage building.
yeah. I just think that's a big part of where you guys could help us if that's your thing with the legislature.
I think anytime you want to come to us or come to Holly actually and say, this is a big issue that we need help on, we can figure out if it's something we can, you know, get to work on and come back to you with some ideas.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that.
I'm glad that's helpful. So in terms of the, I mean, where I thought Clement was going with the value around pools is that, that we have a value about this sense of place that we're trying to protect, that goes beyond, like, there's, I'm going to have a hard, the value that we have a value on protecting the visual quality of our entire context. So obviously we have this ability to protect individual structures, and we have a process for that. But the thing that's very special about Nantucket is the visual quality of the whole. And I don't know if this is productive for forming a working group, or if we just want the working group to be about screening. I don't know. Could I hear from some more people?
I would add experiential to the visual.
Experiential,
as well as visual.
Yeah, and some of these are things that we could actually do something about, and some of these are things that we can't do anything about, but we can, like, you know, try to get other people to do something about. Experiential.
I was thinking about Matticat and how they got their restrictions on pools and the different zoning special permit that they need to get.
Special permit, yes.
Yeah, special permit, as a tool to say, if you have a 10 by 10 backyard and you want to put an 8 by 8 spa in it, you shouldn't be able to, because you should have more restrictive setbacks, et cetera, because you are in the tightly packed, dense core historic areas. Certain zoning, certain zones have, you know, denser fabric than others. And it seems like that would be one way to do it as a physical, in a physical sense. And I don't know how Matticat did it.
It was a town meeting.
Put in an article at town meeting.
Yeah, or advocate to the planning board for it. I mean, this is what Anne is doing. Angus, did you had a hand up?
I was going to say that, you know, these historic buildings that the HDC helps to protect don't live in vacuums. It's about the setting and surroundings. It's about how any alterations fit into the context. And so, you know, part of what the Historical Commission advocates for are the surroundings, the streets, the sidewalks, the other assets, historical assets that aren't reviewed by the HDC. But the HDC has power that I think has been relinquished a little bit, that I think could get stiffened back up about the appropriateness of the size and volume, arrangement, setbacks, all those parts that are part of the review process. And I feel like the pools and the screening that diminishes the vistas and often the rural feelings that we have. We have a very different feeling town than almost every other town in America. And that's part of what makes this special, but that's changing daily and weekly and yearly because of what is allowed to happen. And so if we can work together to bolster what acts we already have and legislation we already have, we can also advocate for improvements on that, whether it's in zoning or town bylaws or any of those other modes. But the whole pool spa thing really, I think, falls into setting of the surroundings and how that either enhances or compromises a historic setting. And I have I have other thoughts about what is not within view, because it's not like you can build a pink rubber house just because it's not within view of a public way. So we need to clarify better what is allowed when it's not in view, and think about it. Often in the meetings, I can hear comments, oh, this isn't appropriate, but it's not within view. Well, I mean, this whole island is the historic district. And so, that's why there's a review at all. So anyway, I think that's another topic, but.
Well, Angus, I'm wondering actually if you're taking us towards, so you're definitely seconding this idea of a value around this, this context, this experience that is Nantucket, a Nantucket value. But I'm wondering if you're actually taking us to the building with Nantucket in mind.
Yes. I mean, sometimes I wonder if that's forgotten. And also it was written at a different time. We have different challenges now. I don't think back when it was written, we had very many pools being
or nightclubs
applied for, or nightclubs in a residential neighborhood. And so things have changed. And I remember 30 years ago going to the HDC, and no one would ever propose a deck, a second story deck and French doors within view of the street, let alone on the front of the house in a heavily public, traveled way. And so, part of it was sort of a gentleman's agreement and respect for the island. And then it's really just like whatever's trending is, it sort of becomes acceptable because there's such a volume of it. And I think there's just looking back at these guidelines and strengthening our resolve in responding to that and incorporating it. And if it needs to change, and in some areas it really does need to change, we need to rewrite those so it addresses our current issues.
Holly, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to mention, in the interest of time, we're getting almost to 3 o'clock, and I kind of want to see what we want to do for a wrap up and next steps.
Yeah, good point. Diane, did you want to say something?
Well, I want to say quickly, I said it many times. There is, in our background and objectives, there is an act which we are led by that says to promote the general welfare of the inhabitants of the town of Nantucket through the preservation and protection of historic buildings, places, and districts of historic interest through the development of an appropriate setting for these buildings, places, and districts, and through the benefits resulting to the economy of the Nantucket in developing and maintaining its vacation travel industry through the promotion of these historic associations. In these matters, the HDC is sole adjudicatory authority. It gives us, if that doesn't give us permission to look around in an area and say, this doesn't fit in, whether you can see it or not, then I don't know what doesn't. It should be taken out of what our objectives are published for the town, because the business of the spas and the pools like that one on Main Street in Sconset, that yes, indeed, you can't see it because it's in the backyard, but it's Main Street in Sconset. It doesn't fit in to the neighborhood. And in regards to that, I think that we should have some conversation with the real estate board, because how many times have you guys looked at the real estate thing and they say, this house is for sale, it's an old house, but there's room in the backyard to put a cottage and to put a pool and to put a cabana, and you know, it's a good thing. We need them to help us too, to try and have their new people that are buying houses understanding what they're buying and not buy an old house. And as you said earlier tonight, buy an old house and they don't really want it, so they strip it. I think we need to have some major meeting once or twice in a year that we get together if we're really going to work hard to save what we have left on this island. And it means having the guts to step up to the law and say, hey, this is what I can do or you can do, and not get run over.
So Diane, I thank you, and you're right. I completely agree. I'm just wondering, do we want to go around, because I think obviously what we want to do is set some next steps, but it sounds like maybe a vision for some years out might be that we have the surveys and the information we need to do our work. We have a commitment to sustainability and have identified and made some progress about how we could increase that in, you know, what is a really, really wasteful and impactful industry that we're involved with. And that we have have some pathways to enhance the visual and experiential aspects of Nantucket that we're charged, that we feel are eroding, that will have some ways of making progress against those 3 items. And it's going to require some work groups. I think they do need to be joint work groups. I really wouldn't want to see a work group just of one or the other. And that one of the work groups could be sustainability. And I actually think what I'm hearing from everybody is the other one has to be more about these guidelines. And if it's not appropriate to call it updating building with Nantucket in mind, maybe it's just appropriate to come up with just a short list of issues that really have to be tackled and how they're going to be tackled. Some of them will be zoning, some will be guidelines, some will be just better communication with different boards and including the realtors. Can we hear from folks about those 2 ideas? Tom, I see your hand up.
I think it does involve updating building with Nantucket in mind. I think it's a useful tool that everybody on both of these boards could use going forward. And the other thing that I've learned today from these 2 hours that we spent here is that I think I really am in agreement with some people that I never thought I would be agreeing with that are here today. And what everyone has said is really worthwhile. And I think that these 2 commissions, these 2 boards would really benefit from meeting again rather than, from what I understand, with once a year. I think we should, whether it's, I think we should all meet again and hear what everybody has to say. And then if you want to break up into smaller subgroups, that would be one thing. But I think what we've done here today is I've really learned a lot. I've really had a good meeting. I've enjoyed this very much.
Great,
It's
Tom.
very beneficial.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, I just want to, I know that we, at the beginning of this conversation, mentioned public outreach. And, you know, I also understand that there are quite a few commissioners on both boards that at the beginning of this meeting, and hopefully have a little bit of better for clarification, didn't quite understand what our role was, and vice versa. So I wonder if there's a component of public outreach to where not only do we continue to learn and understand what each commission is tasked to do and where there's overlap, but also, let the public know. I think that's important. I know Holly's big on outreach and education, so maybe you have something to say on that, or Hillary, or any commissioners. Thank you.
Actually, thank you, David, for bringing that up. I was going to say, it seemed like from this past discussion, the last 10 minutes or so has really been about education. There's the talk, what Diane was talking about with realtors. Yes, it's all about education. It goes back to what the Historical Commission has been working on, and David, you and Hillary have been working on this from an education perspective for NRAB, about understanding historic structures and what people can do with them versus just what the highest and most usable of a piece of property, what's actually historically appropriate. Historic tax credits. There's all these different aspects. And that kind of goes back to why I'm always trying to push education on you all, why I'm trying to facilitate as much education that I can provide to you all from these other organizations that we are members of, whether it's from experience that I've had, from being in the preservation world for many years now, from education perspective, planning perspective, all these different things, to help you all facilitate your job. But I think the biggest thing from this entire 2 hours that we've had is, I think the MOU is important for both commissions to have their work groups to discuss what they would like to see in that. Staff will facilitate what that would look like from once we receive that information, but then having these joint work groups. I agree with the chair, Hillary. I agree with you on having a CLG work group on sustainability, but also education, because again, the public is going to be looking at you all on trying to understand what the role of this commission is together, but also understanding individually. And that's why you'll see in that page we have so far for the CLG, it's very clear on what the duties are of you all as well as myself. And I foresee having a preservation planning page, so that way more information is going to be at the fingertips of the general public to help facilitate, understanding just history in general. Where do I go to find this? Where do I go to find that? Because that has been lacking, as well as processes and procedures. How do I do this and how do I do that? And I think this is where this commission would help one another. In interest of time and having to wrap up with NCTV, Madam Chair, I don't know how you want to do this, but that's kind of where I was thinking is there should be an MOU. Each commission take charge of that, but then also working on these individual work groups with the joint CLG. And seeing what the interest is from all the commissioners doing that at some point. Zoom is a great thing. I know at some point, I know we all want to get back together in person, but for those type of meetings would be beneficial. So thank you all.
Thank you, Holly. So we have Carrie and Val and Stephen. We haven't heard much from Stephen and Diane from the HDC, and we've heard a couple people from the NHC and Holly say they like the idea of these groups. They like the idea of focusing on sustainability, building with Nantucket in mind, and the MOU seems to be important. I think that there's less need for an MOU because we each have our mandates and we need to stick with them. And I think as we spend more time together, that'll go away. But also happy to do that if others feel that way. Could we just hear from some of the folks from the HDC about the idea of maybe circulating a list with these work and signing up for work groups?
It's a good idea, Hillary.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Stephen?
His internet sometimes is spotty.
Carrie?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Val?
Well, of course me. I'm the jaded one. I've been on so many work groups and we spend time and hours and we put stuff together and it never goes anywhere. So I'm not going to jump up and raise my hand.
Well,
just saying.
I hear you, but Val, I mean, our commission has gotten so much done in the time that we've been around. You know, we've gotten this survey off the ground, and we have Holly as our preservation planner. We've become the CLG. We've gotten, you know, these reviews done. We did a whole report on Harbor Place that I think really changed the conversation around the Master Municipal Harbor Plan and Chapter 91 and thinking about zoning down there. So I'm an optimist. I think we have people here who know how to get stuff done, and I think we have some pretty good ideas. And with building with Nantucket in mind, we actually have funding. You guys have funding for that. So we just need to decide to spend that money, and you know, Holly knows how to spend money. So and there are people who, you know, I think will want to work on that. So
we've started a year or so ago, and we broke things into modules, and it, I don't know, just got dumped.
Well, if you don't mind, I would like to just a couple of brief comments.
Oh, yeah.
I'll back into that. So the HCC has an organizational focus committee, and we had some problems with membership due to health issues and hearing issues. And then COVID occurred. So that would be a great avenue for involvement of the HDC. You know, we reinvigorate the membership. And it also kind of leads me back to the MOU. But before I speak on the MOU, I just want to say that I think personally, I appreciated all the discussion that happened today, and I appreciate the granularity we got into. It helps to establish a sense of perspective, or our individual perspectives, but a mutual perspective too. Of overall the discussion, it occurs to me that really what we've been discussing is, of course, preservation of Nantucket resources, the historic architecture in situ, reuse for non-historical architecture with a strong nod towards sustainability, and of course, character and setting, specifically with regards to pools, but also kind of historically foreign landscape elements. All of these, I would suggest to you, are part of what is our group charge, which is they are elements of a local preservation program that we are tasked to work together on and responsible for together. And I believe that an MOU, developing a framework in order to do that work, is an important, if not foundational element. I think that such a program it's not a stopgap, it's a near, but primarily mid and long-term plan. And for that to be successful over that period of time, it requires a lot of steps, widespread participation, in order to develop a sense of ownership of not just memberships of the commissions, but to receive assessments and direction from our professional staff. And most particularly where this goes into regulations and guidelines, their adoption, purviews, and so on and so forth. But also just to make this a successful endeavor. So I understand that we're talking, and I'm not trying to suggest in any way, shape, or form redirecting energy from individuals who are trying to come up with their stopgap solutions. You know, do what you may and bring them to town meeting or whatnot and see what develops. It's important that we as a community have those discussions, regardless of the results. Those discussions can inform our local preservation program plan. But I do think that it would be very helpful that as a result of this meeting, we agree on a framework from which we will work, and that we will then and we also agree that we'll set about developing that framework. That seems to me like the essential next step. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So in terms of, I'm just thinking in terms of agreeing on a framework on which we will work, do you mean specifically you want to have these groups that we're talking about, and then have them come up with ideas and bring them back to the group together and liaise with Holly in the meantime? Or were you thinking about something else?
I would suggest, having spoke to Ray a little bit about this, is the idea of the MOU is the framework, the foundation, really guidelines and guardrails for us to be working in a productive way to within our purview, but to further our purview, so that we don't end up spinning our wheels. It's not to say that there aren't other initiatives that can't come from our discussion, but it would be important to kind of work out what we do, how we do it. And I think that a work group being involved in accomplishing that based upon outlining our respective, memorializing our respective roles, our mutual roles, and then using some of these survey items as the basis for more specific framework on how we would proceed, for instance, with work groups. For instance, are there particular things that go to the organizational focus committee, like the guidelines, versus general discussion on topics such as, or at least initially general discussion on topics such as pools and spas or landscape elements or furtherance of character and setting protections? I think there are different, I don't think that we can map out every instance, nor would it be wise to try attempt to do so. But I do think it would be helpful to have a framework, because then it will make our relatively brief meetings, if you think about it in the context of how much time we meet on HCC matters, it would give us, I think, the structure that would be required to be as productive as we need to be in order to accomplish the local preservation program plan. I mean, that's, aside from the historic surveys, that is our other mutual mandate. In fact, it's our only other mutual mandate. So I think it's important that we work on that.
So, Stephen, are you suggesting that you want to reconvene your organizational group and add some people from the NHC and come up with, I mean, when I hear like we should have guardrails, what that means to me is that, you know, people are concerned about somebody, you know, reaching in and doing something they're not supposed to do, which is, you know, important that there's trust. So is that what you want?
No, and actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, Hillary. I think that needs a little room to breathe. With respect to guardrails, I'm speaking specifically with respect to our individual roles under our legislation and as our mutual roles under our legislation. And I'm not suggesting that there be guardrails to quiet discussion in any way, shape, or form. It's just so that we know what we're operating on. I mean, I'll use the example of here's a great example. We get spas in front of the HDC, and we're not even really clear ourselves whether character and setting play a role or if it's only what's visible from the street. So what I would like to do is have us develop those guidelines and guardrails so that we aren't having discussion, again, using the HDC spas as an example, where some members are frustrated because they feel, well, we're not supposed to be talking about things that aren't visible, yet we are. Frustration in these meetings when they're short span meetings and we have a lot to accomplish is a difficult, unfortunate thing to have to try and overcome, and it's not productive. So that's just one tiny little example of how we might work together to develop a framework. With respect to having memberships, I think maybe it would make sense to have a liaison from the HDC at the historic commission meetings. But with respect to the organizational focus committee, I would think that that would be the apparatus that the historic commission would work with. The OFC charged with developing the MOU or delegating that back to our professional staff. You know, there's people who have a lot of experience with this type of thing. And then working with commission members in order to resolve that. Now, when I say, I want to just be clear, I'm not suggesting that this is some long drawn out process. There's no need for that, but it is still something that I believe needs to be done. Could other
So-
work groups be working like on sustainability? I think it would be a little premature just until we know what are our guidelines. I dare say that, and even I, who've read through this multiple times over the years, thinking about a CLG, I'm not entirely clear. And I think it would be helpful for us to be clear so that we are not running into functional shortcomings or even legal shortcomings later in the process by, for instance, voting to sponsor articles or something along those lines.
I feel right now very confused about what to do next, and I'm just wondering if anybody else wants to kind of make some suggestions or jump in or clarify about what the HDC needs, and how to make sure that Stephen's concerns are met and that we can also move forward with some kind of activity. Could I hear from Carrie or Val or
Ken has his
anyone,
hands up, Madam Chair.
or Diane or Ken? Ken, you're so good at this. Ken, what do you think?
I've spent a lot of time listening to what you guys have been talking about. I want to follow up on Steve's idea. I think there is not real clarity in the community right now what the responsibility of how far the HDC responsibility extends and when things that shouldn't be looked at. And similarly, with respect to the Historic Commission, with respect to their level of responsibility. What is clear to me is that there is a way through an MOU to have a statement relative to those two areas in terms of either what the creative legislation is or how it's been structured in terms of what their principal responsibility is. What's been very clear too is that there are a number of areas of overlapping concern. And so I think that the MOU would be very useful in terms of it doesn't go into specifics, but it talks about the conceptual areas of the overlapping concern and indicate that these are at this point in time, you're working to develop a sense of who has primary and who has secondary responsibility with respect to these overlapping concerns. And that then gets to a greater level of clarity in terms of who is moving forward on it, who looks for help from the other, and vice versa. And I think that then ends up having a much clearer picture that the two boards or commissions are really working together to the common goal of, in fact, figuring out how to be able to be most effective in the whole issue of preservation. And that also then allows the ability to have a definition of what we include by preservation, because we've talked about the fact of preservation being part of it, but we've also talked about the preservation in the sense of saving resources when homes are taken apart, removed, and replaced. And so its preservation has two different aspects in a sense that we're taking a look at, and a greater clarification with respect to the different aspects of the interpretation of preservation, and then how that impacts one board more than the other. But I think that then ends up with a greater sense of clarity in terms of what the responsibility is. The other thing is that I think as you move forward, I think what you're going to be more effective, you've identified 4 or 5 subjects that are of interest. What I think you need to do is you need to prioritize them, and then you need to set up separate meetings with respect to one topic at a time, have an agenda with respect to what the issues are with respect to that, have both commissions be able to come back to discuss that, and you come up to resolution and you move on to the others. Because otherwise you're never going to get to a point where you're going to be able to sort of, I don't think, make the kind of meaningful progress that I think is possible based on what I heard today. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you, Ken. So I'm going to just put up a straw man suggestion. Would this group in total be willing to meet monthly for the next 3 months? So 3 meetings. And at the next meeting, Holly will present a total draft starting point, meant to be reworked MOU, because it's largely going to be pulled from stuff that is given to us. I mean, we have tasks given to us. So that's why I'm saying we could just start with something, and then we will pick it apart, put it back together, edit it in real time, and get to some kind of a document that people feel covers what needs to be covered. Then moving past that, if we can get that done, we can start in the next 2 meetings working on some of these group ideas. Could everybody agree to that?
I would agree.
Diane said yes.
I'll say yes.
Who was that?
Carrie.
Angus
Harry
says,
said yes. Okay, I see Clement has a thumbs up.
David
Yes.
says yes.
David says yes. Ben says yes. Mickey says yes.
Angus
Val?
says yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Tom is saying yes. George, I assume you're a yes. Okay. Now, how many months did I say we were going to meet for?
3.
3. Okay, 3 months. All right. I've written that down. I'm going to work with Holly. We're going to get Ray up to speed. If anybody has wrap up ideas, concerns that you want to make sure gets on this list, send it to Holly. Anything else anybody wants to say?
One last thing, I wanted to thank Holly for putting together the CLG packet. I think it was very informative. 60 pages of not very fun reading, but interesting, informative, and thought-provoking material. It really was helpful, and I hope everyone, if they haven't already had the opportunity to look at it, because a lot of the questions and concerns that came up, I think, were addressed in that packet. Not limited to, but including the responsibilities of HDC and the Historical Commission. So anyway, thank you for that, and thank you all for your time today.
Okay. Does anybody want to give a motion to adjourn?
Well,
Make a
I was
motion
supposed
to
to do
adjourn.
the summary, so I make a
Okay,
move to
Clement,
adjourn.
summary.
I really have to go. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, I think we all have to go. My summary is that we move to adjourn. We've learned a lot today. We've learned an awful lot about both institutions, so I appreciate that.
We do
Thank
need
you.
individual roll calls to
Yeah,
adjourn.
and someone has to take over the HDC meeting because Ray isn't here, and adjourn it.
I will.
Thank you,
take it.
Diane.
Okay, does somebody from my commission want to make a motion to adjourn? Oh, I think,
Moved.
I did.
okay, Clement did, Tom seconded, and Mickey,
Aye.
Georgia, Angus,
Hi.
and Tom, Tom, are you in favor of your motion? David
Aye.
and Clement,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Okay, so NHC is adjourned.
Okay. May I get a motion from one of us
So
to,
moved. So moved, and thank you, everyone.
thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Carrie,
Aye.
Val,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. So that is, we are also adjourned.
Thank you all
Thank
very much
you.
for this
Thanks,
important
Holly.
day. Thank you.
Thank you,
all.
Holly.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye,
Thank you.
Kadeem.
Bye.
Holly.
Aye.
Thank you, Kadeem.
Thank
Both of
you.
And Esmeralda too.
You're welcome.